Hello, I'm Nicola Corbin, and I will be going over software for critical medical systems. How much testing is enough? This presentation will go over the impact of medical software, the development and testing process, the importance of software testing and safety critical systems, medical software regulation around the world, the ethical impact, and the conclusion. There are many different types of medical software used today. Just in this picture of this ICU alone, there is a dialysis machine, a ventilator, a monitor to show the patient's vitals. There's IV pumps. The bed is even smart and can send the patient's weight to the electronic health record, and it can change the pressure to prevent pressure ulcers for the patient. There's a lot of medical software not even pictured here. There's MRIs and CT scans, and there's the whole electronic health record system that medical professionals rely on every day. So what are the risks if something goes wrong with these medical devices? There's a risk of life on the patient, risk on the medical staff, and even like insurance companies are at risk if something goes wrong. So they impact not only the patient, they impact the whole medical staff and anybody that comes into contact with these devices. So that brings me to the question, how much software testing is enough when it could potentially endanger a human life? It can't be tested forever or no beneficial medical devices would be developed. So we'll go into that question. So the development and testing process. Medical software development must follow the IEC 62304 guidelines in the US and the EU. So these guidelines are a standard that specify the life cycle requirements for the development of medical software. Testing is very important in the development process and is required to ensure the safety of the product and that it meets these regulation standards. Testing should be done to 100% coverage. That means that there should be a sufficient amount of tests to cover every line of code in the application. Some software development models that are followed in this process of developing this medical software are the waterfall, the V-shaped, and the agile models. The waterfall model focuses mainly on the planning and documentation phases. This model, each phase is done in a sequential pattern. So one phase needs to be finished before the next phase can begin. This can be costly and hard to make changes when you find some problems in the testing process. So you have to go back to the beginning and do each stage over again. The V-shaped model is very similar to the waterfall model. There's just more testing involved in the V-shaped model. Then there's the agile model. The agile model allows constant change to requirements throughout the development process and the frequent delivery of a product. This model uses continuous testing throughout the development process and does not have a long planning phase. So this model is more cost effective. So that brings me to talk about the cost of testing. Testing for critical software systems is costly. So this may make some companies want to cut corners and avoid developing the critical medical software in order to decrease their financial burden. Most errors are found at the end of the development process, which makes it very difficult to go back, especially if you're using the waterfall model, and redo all those steps over again. The agile development model improves the cost and time efficiency of testing. And it has become more popular to use in medical software development. There was actually a study on agile development in medical software, and they found that agile development works as long as there's compliance checks with each code commit and that the software teams use the appropriate tools for their development. So medical software development around the world, what kind of regulations are out there? The US and the EU both use the IEC 62304 as their standard. In the US, the FDA classifies medical devices and the HIPAA regulates the privacy. Um, the FDA classifies their devices in 1, 2, and 3 classes, with 3 being the highest risk devices. The EU is very similar to the US, but they classify their medical devices a little bit differently. They have more sections, such as they have 1A, 1 for or 1 for sterile and 1 for non-sterile. Then they have a 2A and a 2B, with 2B being a little bit higher risk than 2A. And then their 3 is their highest risk. And they also have their GDPR for privacy regulation. Other countries don't seem to have, or the standard that the US and the EU do, the IEC 62304. They may use it, but that information is not easily found. And it's hard to find if they have their own regulations. But each country does typically have their own equivalent of the FDA. For example, Brazil has the Brazilian Health Surveillance Agency, and China has their own China Food and Drug Administration to regulate their medical devices. So what is the ethical impact of testing on this critical medical software? I decided to analyze the utilitarian approach because the basis of the utilitarian approach is to benefit the most people and prevent harm to anyone. So when it comes to medical devices, everyone should be treated equally and have the safest devices available to them. So no one should die because somebody didn't test enough or there was a faulty medical software device that was provided to them. Medical doctors have to take an oath to do no harm. And I feel like even if you don't have this direct patient contact, and you're creating the software that can impact these patients, I feel like these developers should also take an oath to do no harm, and should realize the impacts that they have on these patients and on the medical community in general. So in conclusion, there need to be regulations in place, such as the IEC 62304 that the US and the EU use. Most countries have their own FDA that regulates their medical devices. Software developers should use the model that best fits their project and meets the regulations, and they should use the agile model if possible. This will improve cost and time efficiency. And software developers should strive to meet the 100% testing coverage. So being able to test every line of their code, make sure it's all covered. And the software development team should understand the implications of delivering a poorly tested software. They should strive to do no harm, and they should need to realize what can happen if these poorly tested medical devices can make it out into the medical world. It can ultimately kill someone. So I think it's important that they understand that. So that was what I found throughout this research project. Here are my references. Okay. So that's the end. Thank you so much for listening to my research presentation, and have a great day.